A cold November in Amityville, a quaint town in Suffolk County. At 112 Ocean Avenue resides the Defeo family. Ronald Sr. works at his auto dealership. Louise cares for the children. 23-year-old Ronald Jr., also known as Butch, is the eldest son. Dawn is the second eldest. She is 18. Allison is just starting her teenage years at 13. 12-year-old Mark is second to youngest, with John Matthew at 9 years old. The Defeos are the typical 70s family. It's 6 a.m., November 13, 1974. Ronald Jr. has just showered and is setting off to work. He has a job alongside his father at the auto dealership. It's 12 p.m. and Ronald Sr. hasn't arrived for work, which is unlike him. Ronald Jr. decides to slack off and hit the local bar Henry's. Ronald drinks, relentlessly calls home to no avail. He rants to his friends about his family. Ronald Jr. hasn't had a good relationship with his father, despite being showered with gifts and money throughout his childhood. He has a cross to bear. Drugs and alcohol have been a big part of Ronald Jr.'s life. He staged a robbery at the auto dealership to steal $20,000. When the police inquired, he flew into a rage, refusing to help, raising suspicions. This led to a confrontation with Ronald Sr. He threatened to shoot his father. Fortunately, the gun malfunctioned, but the father-son relationship was completely fractured. Ronald Jr. finishes his drinks and heads home from the bar. At 6:30 p.m. a distressed Ronald barges into the bar, yelling, "My mother and father have been shot, help." A group gather and head to the family home. Much to their horror, they find Ronald Sr. and his wife Louise, shot face down in their bed. 911 is called. The bodies of Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew are all found dead. Eerily, they are all face down in their beds with gunshot wounds. Who could have committed such a heinous crime? According to Ronald Jr., this was the work of a mob hit. As police investigate the horrific scene, they find all the family have been shot whilst they slept. The murder weapon is nowhere to be found. The weapon is a .35 caliber Marlin gun. A gun that fires a shot at 120 decibels. The family have slept through the 8 shots fired across 2 floors. The neighbors didn't hear a thing, well, except for the Defeo's dog barking. As police rule out mob ties completely, the suspicion falls upon Ronald. His alibi that he was at work the day it happened is questioned when the medical examiner determines they died around 3:15 a.m. Dawn's body was found in her bed, but she was the only victim to have sustained skull-breaking head injuries before being shot. Forensics think Dawn was placed onto her bed after being killed, then shot. This points the finger at Ronald Jr. along with the empty Marlin gun box found in his room. He is brought in for questioning. After giving the police a myriad of alibis, he finally confesses to the murders. The weapon is found in a storm drain along with bloody clothes. Ronald's defense lawyer William Weber tries to enter an insanity plea, after Ronald says a cloaked, hooded apparition appeared before him telling him to kill his family. At the trial almost a year after the murders, Dr. Harold Zelen testifies that Ronald is mentally ill. He has an antisocial personality disorder but was competent enough to understand his actions on the night of the murders. The Defeos were a wealthy family. Ronald's motivation may well have been for the inheritance. A jury found Ronald guilty and he was sentenced to 6 life sentences. The murders were high profile, and whilst Ronald is shipped off to prison, his lawyer Weber is seizing the opportunity to profit from the murders by touting for book deals. Newlyweds George and Kathy Lutz are house hunting and stumble upon 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville. A bargain at $80,000 for such a grand house. It has been just over a year since the gruesome murders, but this would not deter the couple. The house was a perfect home for them and Kathy's 3 children. They even purchased all of Defeo's furniture for a bargain price of $400 and moved in December 19, 1975, just in time for the holidays. The following 28 days would etch 112 Ocean Avenue into the Horror Hall of Fame, be it a controversial one at that. George and Kathy decide to have the house blessed by a Catholic priest. As he performs the blessing in one of the rooms, a loud voice appears to boom, "Get out!" He makes his way out of the house, then telephones the Lutzes, uttering to them to stay away from that room. Yet the Lutzes had all the Defeo's religious statues removed from inside and outside of the home. As the family settled into their new home, they begin to notice strange things. Rooms would be full of flies despite the winter chill. George began waking up at 3:15 a.m. every night, then wandering to the boathouse. Unknown to George, this is the time the Defeos were killed. A large lion ornament the Lutzes owned would appear to move on its own, to the extent when they took it out the house, it mysteriously reappeared the next day. Kathy kept having the sensation of someone touching her, along with nightmares that replayed the murders of the previous occupants in graphic detail. The children began sleeping on their stomachs in the same position the Defeo's children were found. George kept hearing doors bang, but when investigated the doors were shut. Only he would hear it in the house. He would experience spontaneous smells of sewage or overwhelming perfume. He discovered a secret room behind a bookcase with all the walls painted red. Kathy had unexplained scratches appear across her chest and feelings of unease. When guests visited the home, they would hear unexplained noises. But most disturbing was the Lutz's daughter, Missy. She told her parents of the imaginary friend Jody, described as a pig with red glowing eyes that could change shape and size. George is out at the boathouse, closing the door that keeps opening itself, looks up and sees a figure in Missy's room. As he goes into the house, he finds nothing there and Missy fast asleep. The family were experiencing a dark force within their home, George being the most afflicted with paranormal activity to the point he begins to question his own sanity. On the 28th day in the house, something occurred that would send the Lutzes packing. They never really spoke of what happened, but shrouded in fear, they packed a few things in the car and headed to Kathy's mother's home nearby. The Lutzes would never return to Ocean Avenue. Traumatized by the events that occurred over those 28 days, allow paranormal investigators into the house. Ed and Lorraine Warren, esteemed demonologists in the paranormal scene, visit the house, along with a group of investigators and their monitoring equipment. Lorraine claims to feel the overwhelming presence of a demonic entity, and researchers claim the house once belonged to John Ketchum, a black arts practitioner, but historians later dismiss Ketchum as having any occult links. High on the media circus the Lutzes' story was attracting, the Lutzes are approached by journalist Jay Anson, who wishes to write a book about their experience in the Amityville house. They provided hours of tape-recorded recollections of the events for Anson. The Amityville Horror was published September 13, 1977, nearly 3 years after the murders of the Defeo family. The book was an instant hit, storming up the bestseller list and generating serious revenue. Much to the dismay of Ronald Jr.'s lawyer, William Weber, who sued the Lutzes and the book publisher for a share of the $60 million profits, as he had contacted the Lutzes regarding the book deal, but he wanted his client Ronald to gain revenue from a book, and this is why the Lutzes rejected his offer. Weber only claimed $17,000 from the case. The Cromartie family purchased the Lutzes' home for a discounted price of $55,000 and moved in 5 months before the book release. The Cromartie family experienced no strange happenings, well apart from morbid tourists coming to view the House of Horrors. The Cromarties eventually invited news crew to the home to prove the house was not haunted. They went on to sue the Lutzes and the publishers for an undisclosed sum, claiming the story was falsified and created purely for financial gains. With a movie deal now in progress, the Lutzes' tale was headline news. With every tale of the supernatural comes the skeptics. Kathy and George both allowed themselves to be subject of a lie detector test and passed. Amityville was now famous. The 1979 movie starred James Brolin and Margot Kidder as George and Kathy Lutz. The film, as with the book, was a big success. Following the movie release, William Weber told People magazine, "I know this book's a hoax. We created this horror story over many bottles of wine. I told George Lutz that Ronnie Defeo used to call the neighbor's cat a pig." Weber then claimed he would file a motion for Ronald Jr.'s insanity plea to be reevaluated following the Lutzes' claims of paranormal events, but no motions were ever filed. Seemingly Weber too was only interested in profit. Amityville remains scarred by the Lutzes' tale. The 4 families who have lived at Ocean Avenue since have reported no strange activity or events since, although the house still attracts morbid tourists to this day. As for Ronald Jr., his parole attempts have been rejected. His most recent claim that Dawn instigated the killings and was a main protagonist, no evidence has ever come to light to support this. Although how the Defeos slept through the shootings remains a mystery. Why did Ronald Sr. adorn his house and garden with religious ornaments a month before his murder? Did George Lutz dabble in the occult and summon dark forces that terrorized his family, or was their intention to make money from the Defeo tragedy all along? Kathy Lutz passed away in 2004, followed by George a year later. Their Amityville story remains their legacy. Spooky going-ons or greed? We will never know.